And yet we go to work, we get busy, we got to get something to keep us going. Well, last year, my wife and I decided, you know what we need? We need a break. So we went around Australia. We spent 2 months traveling around. This is a nice photograph here of our trip around Australia. This is actually the Olgas. It's in Ayers Rock. It's in the Northern Territories. Absolutely beautiful. We found all these beautiful spots. And you know, something that will do us really a lot of good is actually take time off. You know, we don't have the time, we don't have the money. All these things happen to us, and we don't have the time nor the money, but we found a way to do it. So we could go out there, and it was the best stress relief in the world. You can take saunas, you can take relaxing lessons, and none of it works because you need to actually take time to relax and enjoy yourselves. So this is absolutely something that we got a chance to do. When we talk about nature's last call, you know, what we're going to talk about is actually from a spiritual perspective a little bit here of what God is trying to actually work with each of us in nature all around us. When we look at our personal needs, my wife took a special, trying to get understanding everything, so she went ahead and actually went into the health business. And actually just this month, we just opened up a clinic in Parramatta in the Sydney area. So if you ever come to Sydney, come take a look, come visit us over there and enjoy some of the things that we're doing over there. Now, just to look at a little bit here, when we talk about nature's last call, we're looking at all the things that are happening around us, the chemicals that we're fighting with, the different people trying to get money out of us every which way, whether it's through pharmaceuticals, whether it's through the food that we eat. You know, we need to stop and think of what it was like in the very beginning of this earth. And I just want to stop for a few moments here as we think about what the world was like in the beginning of time. For a moment, just imagine the luscious green grass on the rolling hills. In the book Bible, Genesis chapter 1, it says, "And God said, let the earth bring forth grass, the herb yielding seed and the fruit yielding fruit after his kind, whose seed is in itself upon the earth." And it was so. And the earth brought forth grass and herb yielding seed after his kind, and the tree yielding fruit whose seed was in itself after his kind. And God saw that it was good. Just imagine this beautiful picture in your mind. And that is what nature was like in the very beginning. You think of the solar system in Genesis 1, 14 to 18. And God said, let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years. And let them be for lights in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth. And it was so. So you think of everything around us. You look on a beautiful dark night, especially if you go out. When we went into the Northern Territories in Australia, there is not many people there at all. And nighttime was absolutely fabulous. You can see things you've never seen before because you're so far away out of the city. You know, in the United States, I've always tried to live in the country. So we always had a chance to see the stars and everything that you can't see in the city. But when we went so far out of civilization, as in the Northern Territories of Australia, you see things you never see before. This absolute fabulous solar system. And God made two great lights. The greater light to rule the day, we call it the sunshine, and the lesser light to rule the night, which we call the moon, and made the stars also. And God set them in the firmament of heaven to give light upon the earth, and to rule over the day and over the night, and to divide the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. So this is in the very first beginning. He put the seasons in their appointed times, the summer and the winter, everything in regularity. The birds of the sky. Now this here was actually a photograph in Lake Argyle. This is right in the middle of West Australia, actually on the northeastern side of the Kimberleys. Absolutely a fabulous place. And here's a couple of eagles that come and nest there every single year. And as we were on the lake, we went there and saw these beautiful eagles. Well, God also put the birds in the sky in Genesis 1. And God said, let the waters bring forth abundantly the moving creature that had life, and fowl that may fly above the earth in the open firmament of heaven. And so he also made the whales, the every winged fowl, all these beautiful things, the animals to inhabit the globe, the various type of animals, the different type of creatures. Going out in outback Australia, it was just absolutely amazing to be driving down the road and there's a whole bunch of emus grazing out along the side of the road. Kangaroos, of course, everywhere. All these things that God had made. And finally, the crowning work of creation in Genesis 1:26. And God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth. You know, when we actually think about us as human beings, we're actually in charge of this world. Yeah, you take a look at nature. A lot of things that are done in nature are our responsibility. Just recently now, you all are familiar with the tsunami that hit the Pacific, what was it, a year ago or so, and that hit the coast of Japan with that huge wave. I don't know if you had a chance to look at some of the footage of that wave going right into the coastal city there of Japan there. And then, of course, the power plant, the power plant that was devastated. They're just coming out now to realize that most of that damage by that nuclear power plant was man-made. It was not a course of nature. There was all beforehand. There was warnings given. Here's what you need to do. Some of the cooling systems were not even up to par at that time. They said you need to improve the cooling system on these things because there's possible problems. And of course, when the tsunami hit, it just devastated everything. A lot of it was man-made. You know, when it says here that you shall have dominion over the fish of the sea and everything, we are actually responsible for our environment of what is happening around us. And all this God did in 6 days of creation week. And what was it for? Why did God make all this beauty there? It says in Genesis 2:7-8, and the Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. And God planted a garden eastward in Eden, and there he put the man whom he had formed. God did all these wonderful things for you and me, so we can have a chance to enjoy some of these things. It was designed for man that he had created. That is why he created it. Actually, here is a photograph here, as you can see here. This is a photograph in Australia. It is in the it's near Ayers Rock, and it's actually a little place they call the Garden of Eden. It's a beautiful place out of it's Kings Canyon, that's where it was. It's right there in the Kings Canyon, absolutely fabulous there. And God designed it for us. In Genesis 2 verse 15, it was not just so that we can look at it. It was actually designed for our benefit. Genesis 2:15, and the Lord God took the man and put him into the Garden of Eden to dress it and to keep it. Did you know that we are created to work? Did you know that? When you take a look at what we are doing, we are so busy with technology. We're so busy. We go to work. We either take the bus, train, or get in our car. It's parked right next to us. We get there least amount as walking as possible. And our desire is to get a job where we can sit down and manage something. That's a desire. I grew up on a farm in Northern California in Sacramento area. And I used to hear my dad always talking about the day when we will have such a state in our farm that we can afford to do no more work. That we can only hire everyone else to do the work for us. And you know what? That has been our curse. And so what do? Instead of working, we now have to have the gym. We have to go to a gymnasium. We have to exercise ourselves. We have to find ways to create exercise, which is better than nothing, obviously. If you have no other opportunities, and that's the best you can do. But however, imagine exercising in places like this. And many days, we went out for hikes, and a couple days, I went out. It was like 20 kilometers on a hike when we were up in the in Catherine Gorge, to go up there and look at all those inlets. 20-something kilometers per day was absolutely fabulous to see things that you can't see anywhere else. That was so much better for me than sitting there trying to pump up some of those exercises. You get not only the physical stimulation, which is important, but also you get that mental stimulation of that beauty all around you. And again, I say, if there's nothing else, obviously some people love that, and there's nothing wrong with getting some form of exercise, but combining it with something like this. And yes, when I'm going around, I'm parking in the... I look at parking lots now, and I'm a little bit more conscious to park a little bit away. It's easier to find parking, by the way, when you're further away. Up close, you have to sit there and get frustrated because there's no parking spots. You drive a little bit further away, you can walk a little bit more. So many things that God designed us for, specifically to have exercise itself. You know, when God took a look at everything at the end of creation week, He saw that everything that He had made, and behold, it was very good. Absolutely fabulous. So in our mind, we can think of that perfection, that beauty. And at the end of that 6 days of labor, it says here, thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them. And on the seventh day, God ended His work which He had made, and He rested on the seventh day from all the work which He had made. And God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because that in it He had rested from all His work which God created and made. You know, we not only need time to work, time to exercise, we also need time to rest. And here God set aside some time that we can rest from our labors. And not only this kind of rest, but also it was absolutely fabulous to go out and have some rest of taking time off. You know, living in the United States was quite interesting. There you get 2 weeks of vacation a year. And that's as much as you get, all right? And 2 weeks, that's all. And going to Australia, most Australians, they get 4 weeks of vacation a year. And they also get, every 10 years, you get, 3 months long service leave, something of that nature. And a lot of people take that time to go around and visit. And it's absolutely something that is actually needful. And we don't think about that. We're so busy trying to survive. Now, when you think about this world, just stop and look. When you look at it from outer space, I don't know how many of you, obviously some of you were around when the astronauts went to the moon for the very first time. I remember it as a child. And you take a look at some of the photographs that they were showing there, and the Earth just sitting there hanging on nothing. Can you imagine the Earth hanging on nothing? Just sitting there. It says here, Job 26, He stretcheth out the north over the empty place and hangeth the earth upon what? Upon nothing. He's just sitting there. How does it sit there? Imagine all the laws of physics and motion combined in 1 week's worth of work. I know we sometimes think about evolution and all those type of things, but you take a look at all the requirements to hang the world on nothing. That just does not happen by chance. You take a look at it. You take a look at the body, the way the body organism works. It doesn't happen by chance. There's something there that has to make all those laws in motion. Take one little law. If the earth actually is just a little bit off, guess what happens? We would fry. Gets a little bit too close to the sun, this thing will fry. You get just a little bit further out and you freeze to death. The earth is sitting exactly where it belongs. How does it do that? Is it there by chance? When we think about this whole world, Psalm 104 verse 24 says, O Lord, how manifold are thy works. In wisdom hast thou made them all. The earth is full of thy riches. When you go around the different parts of the world, we were actually going in the middle of the desert of Australia, and of course you have a map and you go to certain places and you find absolute beauty in the middle of nowhere. How does it sit there in the middle of nowhere to have such beauty? How does it get to do that? Traveled in Africa and all these naturally rich places of resources. If all of us who are inhabiting this world would actually manage them, how wealthy we really are. Now God did this. How? Jeremiah 51:15 says, He hath made the earth by His power. He had established the world by His wisdom, and hath stretched out the heavens by His understanding. There is some wisdom behind all of this. We don't understand it all, but there is some wisdom there. And this is why in Nehemiah 9 verse 6, it explains, because God had created all of these things, what should we do? It says, Thou, even thou art Lord alone. Thou hast made heaven and the heaven of heavens with all their host, the earth and all the things that are therein, the seas and all that is therein. And thou preservest them all, and the host of heaven worshipeth thee. Actually, God deserves to be worshipped. It's interesting when we create something. Architect creates a building. People want to, they want to be respected and honored for creating or designing or building this building. And we do that. We place all their names on the plaques. People recognize them for their work. What about the master of the universe to create all these wonderful things that we have around us? God, according to Isaiah 45, verse 18, created this world to be inhabited. It wasn't just so that it can be beautiful. It is very beautiful. All these different places. I look forward to hopefully have a chance to go to Victoria Gardens here. I've heard about it since I was a kid, but I never had a chance to actually go there. I was once before I was actually twice here in Vancouver. Once when I was about 18 or 19 years of age, but we came in and came out for the same weekend. And the last time was in 1982. I was on my way for the first time to Australia, and I stopped at Vancouver Airport on my way out. And so I heard about these gardens. It's absolutely, I want to see some of these things. But you know, God created all these beautiful things so that someone can enjoy it. You know, when you make something, whether it is food, where we make food and make a dish, if you work hard and create it, you do it for what purpose? So that someone can enjoy it. When you make a house or get something, you want someone to enjoy it. Well, God did exactly the same thing. He designed it to be inhabited. And you know something, when you look at creation, this is the amazing thing. With all the things about religion and everything else, sometimes we get lost in what God designed in the very beginning. After He created all this beautiful creation, it says here, Genesis 1:29, and God said, behold, I have given you every herb-bearing seed which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree in which is the fruit of the tree yielding seed, to you it shall be for meat. That's amazing here. In the Bible, the Bible's been around for centuries, for millennia. And you know, in the Bible it says there that when God created mankind, He actually gave us a diet that is designed for the best of human beings. You know, you take a look at our physical features, a physical human being. You take a look at our teeth. You know, they are not designed to rip another animal apart. They're actually herbivorian teeth. That's what we have. You take a look at our intestines. It's so long, goes through all this process. It's designed for a herbivorian diet. And you know, when we buy a car, you get yourself a car, and especially if you buy a brand new car, what do you do with it? You want to take care of it, don't you? So you go through it. How many of us actually have looked at the owner's manual to see how to take care of this car? And if we don't get an owner's manual, we actually go then to a mechanic and regularly have him take care of it, to put in the right oil, to put in all the right stuff. What about our bodies? Are they designed for something? And look at this. You know, we talk about the cans, we talk about the shampoos, we talk about all those things. And you know, this is why I got so concerned over these things when I was still a teenager. You know, I take a look at the deodorants, for example. You know, there's stuff in deodorants that is actually destroying our lives. So now I got to get natural deodorants. I go to get natural soap. I look at shampoo. I get natural shampoo. Yeah, I carry my stuff with me. You know, when I stay in a motel, they have free soap, free shampoo, and I'm afraid to use it. Yeah, I go there. I don't want to use this stuff. I don't want that stuff on my body. Yeah, you get a little bit more concerned about these things. It changes your life. Why? Because you want to enjoy it as much as you can. You know, the worst thing as a pastor is going to a hospital bed and watching someone die. That is the most miserable part of life. And the worst thing is when you go there and you see them dying and you know they don't have to die. And you can't tell them anything because they don't hear anything. They want to eat the food they've been eating. They want to live the last bit of their life. And there's nothing you can do. You know, when we were living in Atlanta, Georgia, we actually went and studied a little bit at the Raw Food Institute there in Atlanta. And to see a man. There was a man there who they brought him in on a wheelchair. He was dying. He had diabetes. He was taking 120 ICUs of insulin every single day. The guy couldn't walk. He used to be a multimillionaire. He had spent all of his money on trying to get his health. He had I think a kidney transplant. I'm not sure if he had a liver transplant or not. The guy was dying, and he spent all his life trying to get the money, and now the last bit of his life left, he's trying to save his life. Spent it all. And he came there, and they changed his diet completely. And 3 days later, he stopped using insulin. 3 days later, in a week, he began to walk. He didn't need the wheelchair. I personally met him a year later, because when I went there, they came for the special program there, and I was there, and he was actually running around. And he was a millionaire again. He got his millions back, but his life was completely changed, living a completely different lifestyle. And of course, to live, he needs to do it the rest of his life. When my wife had a clinic in Georgia, we were doing colon hydrotherapy there, and this man came there. He was dying of leukemia. That was it. They gave him a life sentence. He was there at the hospital. He said, I'm not going to die in the hospital. He says, forget this, I'm going home. He went on raw foods, completely on raw foods, and cleaning out the colon and everything else. And he again was living life again. And yet many people don't want to live. They want to have their conveniences and necessities. But when we look at the very beginning, I know sometimes we don't like to look at the Bible, but that's there. And right at the very beginning, God says, this is going to be your diet in as natural a form as possible. And that's how man was designed to live forever. That's what he did. And with all of these things, in Hebrews chapter 1, it's not Genesis, it's Hebrews. It says, who being the brightness of his glory and the express image of his person, and upholding all things by the word of his power. It's interesting here. You can actually eat everything just right, live everything just right, and ultimately, we still die. Why is it? There's something more than just what we eat. Yes, we can extend our life a lot longer. We can enjoy our life a lot longer. But ultimately, there's something else that keeps that heart beating. There's something that keeps it going. Sometimes you have people, they're on these tubes and on these respirators and the thing to help you, heartbeat and everything else, trying to keep a person alive. I've read about some individuals, 20 years they're kept alive. And finally they said, that's enough. They pulled the plug. And the person's still living. How does the person keep living? Because there's something else controlling when we live and when we die. But obviously with all this beautiful description that we have here, in some places you can go around the world and see some of this beauty still remaining. That's not what happened. Something happened that introduced the destruction that we see around us. Because you see, before man could enjoy that eternal bliss, he had to be tested. You know the story there in the Garden of Eden? I'm sure you've heard of it. There was a forbidden tree. That man said, I want that fruit. I know I shouldn't have it, but I'm going to do it anyway. And there's so many things today around us that we shouldn't have, and yet we want it anyway. We still want something that, especially, you tell a kid, don't do this. Have you seen children? You tell a child, don't cross this line. And what does this kid do? The most important thing on the face of this earth is to cross that line. And that's how we are. We're naturally that way. We want to do what is forbidden. If you ever tell someone you can't do it, that's the very thing that they want to do. That's our nature. Right, because that happened right in the very beginning. God says, don't touch this fruit. And what does mankind do? Oh, I've got to have that fruit. Of all the things in the world, we've got to have that fruit. But his loyalty has to be tested. And they took of the fruit and did eat thereof. And we're suffering from that till this very day. Now, we don't like to call it, but there's a little word for this thing. In Romans 5:12, it says, "Wherefore, as by one man sin entered into the world, and death by sin, and so death passed upon all men, for that all have sinned." It's a thing called sin. So whether we call it transgression, you call it sin, whatever you want to call it, that's what it is ultimately. And so when you destroy the body, ultimately you're destroying something of God's creation. When you destroy the environment, and I'm not going to the extremes of environmentalism, to where you save the little frog and people die. But I believe in the environment. I believe in taking care of my environment. That's why I like living in the country. That's why I live on natural foods. That's why I want to take care of the environment, really to benefit the environment. I want to see my children and children's children to be able to go and see some of these natural things and take care of them. But you see, when sin entered in, there is some miserable chain of consequences that come along with it. And that miserable train of consequences is death, really, that comes along with it. And we find here in Ecclesiastes 7:29, "Lo, this only have I found, that God had made man upright or righteous or pure, but they have sought out many inventions." You know what we are doing today? We are still looking for inventions. We're trying to find, we mentioned earlier, instant foods. We're trying to package our foods in such a way that they can last on the shelf without refrigeration for years. That's what we're doing. You go on the shelf life. I look at, when I was a kid, you go there and you can't find certain things out of the refrigerator. Today you find those things out of the refrigerator. How is it getting out of the refrigerator? And it's still surviving. You take some foods now, you can actually put them at room temperature, and you come there a week later, it's still okay to eat. Well, is it? I wonder if it is. I can't pick out watermelons very well. My wife says, she knocks on the watermelon and she hears what it sounds like and she says, "This is the watermelon." I can't do that. I don't know how. I listen to it. I try to learn. I grew up on a farm and I still haven't figured it out, okay? But you know how I find a good sweet watermelon? I go there and see if the bugs began eating it. Yeah, if a bug began eating it, it's usually a good watermelon. If it's absolutely perfect and no bug dare touch it, I really wonder, is it actually good? And usually I pick out watermelons fairly good if a bug has touched it. Yeah, you take a look on the side there. There's always where it was laying down on the ground. You take a look there and the bug starts eating this thing. We are so petrified about pests. Okay, now, some pests are really a pest. Okay, we have this fruit fly now in Australia where I live, and I'm telling you, this is miserable. The first year, we planted a nectarine tree in my backyard, and we love nectarines, okay? So we go out there, we planted this tree, and wow, this one year, finally, all the fruit came. This tree was full of fruit, absolutely fabulous, And I'm looking at it and smelling it every day. Wow, a couple more days and this is going to be finished. And then we're going to be able to eat our very first fruits off this nectarine tree, And the next day I went out there. Would you believe it? Those beautiful, lovely parrots, about this big. They look really nice, They came and cleaned out and left only the pits still on the tree. They cleaned everything out and the pit was still there. Still hanging on the tree. And it's gone. The whole thing is gone. Everything is gone. I think I had one. Okay, everything is finished. So next year I said, all right, that's it. So I'm going to protect it from the parrots. So I bought this net. And I covered my nectarine tree with this net. Covered it there, tied it up and everything else, And then I had to go on a trip. And I asked my wife, because I saw all the nectarines beautifully, a whole bunch of them growing there. I said, "How's the nectarines?" She says, "Lousy." What happened? Fruit fly got into it. Destroyed the entire thing. Gone completely. And this year I thought, okay, I'm going to at least get some of them. I'm going to peel that off and get the fruit, see what the fruit fly didn't eat. It was loaded with nectarines and I got not one nectarine out of it. So we got to obviously protect ourselves from some of those things. I'm not saying we share everything that we have, and that's what's happening right now in my house. We're sharing everything we have, and we have nothing left. Now, I don't mean to that extent. We need to do some things to protect ourselves from these things. But all of this has come in because we have been seeking many inventions. And really, what has happened is the soil probably is really bad. That is creating that environment for pests. It's interesting when you talk about organic gardening. Now, I grew up on a farm, but it wasn't organic. All right, we used some products, but in Australia, my wife's relatives that live in Australia, they have several farms out in Coleambally, and one of them has gone organic. You have to certify it. In Australia, you have to have, I'm not sure if it's 3 or 7 years you have to prepare the land to make sure it is no fertilizer whatsoever, but organic for like several years before they can say, okay, now you're ready to produce things. And it's amazing. A lot of work goes involved in it to produce in the organic way. Basically the way it was in the very beginning. And you see, God has made man upright, but he's seeking many inventions to make life easier for ourselves. And of course, we have the consequences of all of this. And with all of the conveniences, with all of the seeking for something else, the end result is death. Premature death. You take a look at, the mention there was ADHD. You take a look at autism is constantly prevalent around. I was living in Washington, D.C., just outside of Washington, D.C. quite a few years ago. And we noticed that the people in our church who were living actually in Washington, D.C., they're having a problem. Their kids, almost every kid was having autism. And we were wondering, I wonder if it's in the water that they're drinking. And so we made sure that we didn't have we made sure, we lived just outside in Maryland, so we made sure our water was drinking, we changed everything else, We still had a premature birth, but he was healthy and everything else. So we were able to at least preserve his health. But all that stuff, why? We're being attacked all around us. We're trying to get the best for ourselves, and the end result is death. Maybe we need to reevaluate where we're at, both physically, and this is what we're talking about during the seminar, talking about getting back to nature, nature's last call, we call this here, but going back to nature and basically going back to maybe the God of nature that is introducing us to some of these principles. Science today is finding all these things about the diet we should be having and everything else. And if a person was reading the Bible 2,000 years ago, they would have found the same information. Did you know that? Did you realize that? Now, of course, religions have perverted it and made it say different things sometimes. But if you actually read the Bible for what it says, it actually had it years ago before all of this. We take a look at how this affects the descendants of Adam. Romans 5:18, therefore, as by the offense of one, judgment came upon all men to condemnation. What has been happening ever since Adam sinned? We've been going worse and worse unto condemnation. We mentioned already that Adam had dominion over the animal world, over everything here in this world. And unfortunately, when a man, it says here in 2 Peter 2:19, when a man is overcome, he is now brought into bondage. So if I am overcome by someone, I am now in bondage to that person. And this is what has happened to mankind. We are in bondage. Matter of fact, I've had so many people who try to change their lifestyle. A smoker, for example, is trying to stop smoking, and yet he can't stop smoking. Matter of fact, the more you think about stopping smoking, guess what? The more you want to smoke. You take a look at all these bad things, we mentioned earlier, all these bad things that are affecting us, and you want to change your lifestyle, and guess what? It's forcing you to do it, to do something else. We talk about the water we drink. I get my nice water and everything else, and I come to fly somewhere, and I go through security, and guess what? They take all my water out. Yeah, they take all the water out. And sometimes I think, okay, on the other side, at least I can buy water, or now I can go to the Delta Lounge and get at least some water there, fill it up and everything else. And I get ready to board the plane, and just as I'm about to board the plane, secondary security check, and guess what? No water. They take my water out. Now, how am I going to fly 8 hours, 10 hours? If I go to Australia, it's 13 hours or 14 hours. How do you do that without water? And they say, oh, you can get some in the airplane. I get in the airplane, they give me this little cup. That little cup's supposed to last that trip. You know, we're talking about drinking water. When you get up there, that high altitude and everything else, you end up drinking actually more water. You need less food, more water. So I asked them, well, can I have more water? Well, you know. I said, they promised me out there that when they take my water away, they're going to let me have water when I get in the plane. So please, can I have my water? So they go out there. Finally, they look at me and I go, look, I fill out that thing with water. Why? You know, everything around us is designed to bring us into bondage. Yeah, everything around us. You know, you go there, you want to have a meal. If you're traveling, you know, you look at the meal, you know, look at around, man, what is there to eat? You know, there's nothing here to eat. Well, it's a tragedy, but it's bondage. We are placing ourselves in bondage if you're working hard. And I used to have a construction company when I was in Atlanta, Georgia. And again, you get up early in the morning, you're in a rush, you're grabbing your food to go out to eat, and you get hungry down the road, and what else is there to eat? Nothing. You look around fast foods. Is there anything vegetarian around here? And then if it is vegetarian, it's been fried and cooked to death that you can't even taste the food anymore. We are living in bondage, and we have to find a way to be able to get out of bondage. You see, there has to be a way, because it says here, John 12:31, now is the judgment of the world. Now shall the prince of this world be cast out. It's obviously talking here about Satan, the devil, who is now the prince of the world, according to Matthew 4:8-10. And yes, we are in bondage. When Adam lost it, he lost it to Satan's dominion. And we are, from the time we are born, we are placed in bondage. You know, when my son, I mentioned he was 2 months premature, we were going to have a home birth. We had a midwife and everything, and due to something that happened at her work, actually somebody hit her right in the stomach, and it created a premature birth. And so we were there in the hospital, and I'm looking at all the stuff they're doing to a kid in the hospital. Man, I'm watching this little bitty little baby. They got to poke, they got to prod, they got to give all this type of stuff. You know, and I said, now, wait a minute now. Just hold on a second here. Whatever you're doing, I was reading the charts there, looking at everything they're doing to this kid. And I said, no, wait a minute. Who gave you permission to do this? And then one day they came to me and said, well, we need you to sign this form here to allow us to do this, some kind of a test. And I said, no, I'm not going to sign that. They said, you have to sign it. The government requires you to sign it. So if they required me, they wouldn't be asking for my signature. But obviously they are doing something here to get a waiver to protect themselves because of what they're about to do. And I went back. They said, well, you read it, you investigate, and come back. The next day I went through and I did a whole bunch of research, and I come by why that test should never be done, why it's dangerous. And I came back with all my information there. And finally, after 1 month in the hospital, he was 4 pounds, 6.5 ounces at that point, and I decided it's time for him to go home. I'm tired of all this stuff. And so I went there and I told them, I'm taking my kid home. They said, you can't take him home. I said, oh, yes, I'm taking him home. He's my kid, not yours. And they said, you can't do that. I said, no, okay. Now, you tell me I can't do that. So right now then, from this day onward, I want you to take full responsibility for paying any further bills, because I cease all responsibility for paying this kid. I am not responsible. And you say you have to, then somebody else pays for it, not me. I'm taking him home. They said, no, he has to be at least 5 pounds before he can go home. I said, well, yesterday you sent somebody home at 4 pounds, 6 ounces. And now my kid is past that. And they said, how did you know? I said, I have ears. Yes, I was in the hospital often enough to hear what people were saying. And guess what? They came back and they said, all right, we're discharging your son. You can go home. And you know, I had a concern because he had jaundice there. And they wanted to do all this stuff and all these tests because of his jaundice. And I asked the doctor a little bit about jaundice. What do I do about this jaundice? He said, oh, it's not a problem. I said, so now you're discharging from the hospital. It's not a problem. But the day before, it was an absolute problem, was it? Why was it an absolute problem the day before? And now that he goes home, it's not a problem. And it surely was. All he needed a bit was sunshine. Yeah. You know, you were talking about here, everything's around us, you see. We are not in charge of ourselves, but we can be if we make certain decisions. But we need to make sure we have informed decisions, because some people made decisions that were not informed. I did educate myself to understand all these type of things. We had, back in those days, today breastfeeding is normal almost. Back in those days, it was taboo. You don't breastfeed. You fill the formulas and all this kind of stuff back then, And because he was premature, he couldn't be breastfeeding and all this kind of stuff. Well, we went back home and we actually went to another hospital where they actually had a breast pump and everything else. And we actually got breast milk for that child to get better in the hospital. And this milk that I was bringing in was absolutely yellow for I don't know what length of time. And they said, "What did you do to that milk?" I said, "I just stuck an egg yolk in there." All right, anyway, I was just joking with them. But in reality, the body produced extra colostrum and everything else for the duration of that child. The formula didn't have it. The mother's milk had all that stuff for an extra long period of, we had it almost for a month extra than normally would have had because the child was premature. There's so much things that if we just actually go around and look around us, we can see some of these things instead of being in bondage everywhere around us. Not only have we degraded ourselves, but look at the planet around us. In Genesis 6, this is going to the time of the flood. It says the earth also was corrupt before God, and the earth was filled with violence, and God looked upon the earth, and behold, it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted his way upon the earth. When we look at the flood that happened there in the time of Noah and all this stuff, it was not just Adam, not just his posterity that was corrupt. The whole earth was actually corrupt. Notice here, Genesis 3:16, and God said unto Noah, the end of all flesh is come before me, for the earth is filled with violence through them, and behold, I will destroy them with the earth. That was the first destruction was there by the flood in the time of Noah. But not just mankind suffered. Every living substance was destroyed, except what was taken into the ark. Now, how is the earth being affected by sin? By our work, yes, by mankind, but by what we do. Notice Isaiah 51:6. Lift up your eyes to the heavens and look upon the earth beneath, for the heavens shall vanish away like smoke, and the earth shall wax old like a garment. What's happening to this world? I remember years ago, you plant something out in the garden, and it's going to grow. Okay, without even a lot of fertilizers. And now you plant something in the garden, and guess what? Somehow the earth is waxing old. We are looking at the consequences in nature for our own actions. You look at Fukushima right now. That whole area around Fukushima was actually the agricultural part of Japan. That's where all their agriculture was done. And now it's full of radiation and everything else. They shipped some vehicles. I forgot, was it to New Zealand or was it to the United States? But they came there and they had radiation levels in the vehicles. What's going on? You see that the heavens and the earth, which are now by the same word, are kept in store, reserved unto fire against the day of judgment and perdition of ungodly men. 2 Peter 3:7. Yeah, there is a destruction coming upon this world that we haven't even realized. And yet, God wants to do something else. Not only is there a destruction coming, it says 2 Peter 3:13, nevertheless we, according to his promise, look for a new heaven and a new earth wherein dwelleth righteousness. Yeah, there's a new heaven, new earth coming. There's something else coming ahead of us. Matthew 24:3 calls it the end of the world. And there are certain signs that show that the end of the world is coming. It says here, and as he sat upon mountain, this is Jesus, on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came unto him privately, saying, tell us, when shall these things be, and what shall be the signs of thy coming and the end of the world? What are some of the signs? Verse 6, and ye shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that ye be not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. When you look at actually, from the time that the United Nations was brought into existence, there have been more wars since that time than ever in the history of the world. Right now, there are so many conflicts and turmoils in the world. We think it's coming to an end, but there's more and more frequency than ever before. People getting an argument over I don't know what. My own country where I was born, actually I was born in former Yugoslavia. You know, can you imagine these people grew up together, lived together, they were neighbors, and then all of a sudden, I don't know what happened, what sparks it all up, and all of a sudden they're out there in a civil war fighting each other. People who were friends. You know, there were even people who were Serbian and Croatian. They were husband and wife, and all of a sudden the war comes up and suddenly, sorry, you're out of here. Why? I don't understand it. But people are getting into conflicts over more and more things. And then you go and then you see the devastating Rwanda that happened. I don't know if you saw some of the documentaries on what happened in Rwanda. Absolutely tragic to see people do things that were, unheard of before. And yet the end is not. It's getting worse. It's getting worse. Now, not only the political world, how about Matthew 24, 7 and 8? For nation shall rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom, and there shall be famines and pestilence and earthquake in divers places. All these are the beginning of sorrows. Famines. You know, some places are in famine not because there's no food. You know, right now, Zimbabwe, you think of Zimbabwe, is in an economic crisis. A couple years ago, I saw a, $10 million bill. Was it $10 million? Right. $10 million bill in Zimbabwe, and it was from Zimbabwe, yes.
I have a question about the World Bank.
I don't want to really get into the World Bank right now, okay? But you know, looking at Zimbabwe, Zimbabwe used to be the breadbasket of Africa. Did you know that? The breadbasket of Africa, and people there are starving. People there are hungry. How is it that's going on? There's famines. There's pestilence. Pestilence means diseases. You know, there are diseases today we never even heard of 100 years ago. And you know, as soon as you cure one disease, what happens? Another worse disease than the previous one comes around. This earth is waxing old. Earthquakes. What about earthquakes? There's so many earthquakes, it's pitiful nowadays. And just in the last few years, you talk about trying to help other countries. There's the earthquake in Haiti where a couple 100,000 people died. Just after that, there's a worse earthquake in Chile. Then there's another earthquake. Man, then a couple years before that, you had that big tsunami that hit Indonesia. You know, these things are happening with such frequency. New Zealand just had an earthquake, and then a year later, another earthquake comes there and destroys Christchurch. That's what's happening all around us, things that are unheard of. Why? Because what we as human beings are doing is making this earth wax old. And so famines, man-made famines, diseases of all kinds, and earthquakes are happening. And on top of this, Luke 21:11 says, and great earthquakes shall be in divers places, and famines and pestilence, and fearful sights and great signs shall there be from heaven. What's going on in the atmosphere, we're not even prepared to understand. We got the Hubble telescope going out there looking around to see what's going on, to see what's happening in outer space. And yet more and more things are happening that we have no control over. Daniel 12 verse 1 says, and at that time shall Michael stand up, the great prince which standeth for the children of thy people, and there shall be a time of trouble such as never was since there was a nation, even to that same time, and at that time thy people shall be delivered, everyone that shall be found written in the book. Prophecy actually has it. I know in the world today we're trying to avoid the Bible more and more. And we're trying to understand health. We're trying to prevent these diseases. And we find people who can't help themselves. They're hooked onto drugs and medications and everything else. And you know, we need an outside source of moral power to be able to change our lives. You can't do it by willpower alone. Willpower is important, but you can't do it by willpower alone. There has to be a power outside of ourselves. And this is why there's a time of trouble coming. This is what the Bible says. There's a time of trouble coming that since the nations were in existence, since the time of ancient Babylon being in existence, it's going to be that never existed since that time. Are we ready for that time? Are you getting ready to be able to withstand everything around us? Whether it's economical, you mentioned the World Bank, but whether it's economical, whether it's anything else. You know, a couple years ago, I was in Spain, and the people in Spain were telling me how they wish that the American economy will crash. They said, man, they deserve it. Those Americans need to have the economy crash and everything else. They talked all about it, you know. And it was so interesting to find out as soon as the American economy had a crash, that was the end of Spain. It's in its terrible financial upheaval. Wishing evil for somebody else didn't do them any good. They're so interrelated with each other. Economic devastation, this is nothing yet. We're seeing a lot more things that are going to happen. It says in Luke 21, verse 25 to 26, and there shall be signs in the sun and in the moon and in the stars, and upon the earth distress of nations with perplexity of the sea and the waves roaring, men's hearts failing them for fear and for looking after those things which are coming on the earth, for the powers of heaven shall be shaken. That's what's happening today when people are looking out there. You know, can you imagine the economic crisis hits and people commit suicide? Why do people commit suicide? You know, my wife and I, when we first moved to Australia, we got a real financial shock because it's so expensive in Australia. Sydney is one of the most expensive places to live in the world. And we got there, it's like, what are we doing here? Well, the Lord sent us here, so He's going to find a way for us to live. And well, how are we going to do without money? Well, it's only money. We got each other. We got ourselves here. We can make the best, and God will take care of us somehow. We can trust in the Lord. But you know, people, they lost a little bit of money and they committed suicide. Why? It's only money. We're so attached to things around us. We're attached to our house. We're attached to... there's nothing compared to what there really is. And we're so attached. Our hearts are failing us for fear. Why? Because we're missing something. We're actually missing something. There's something missing in our life. You know, so yeah, we can go ahead and improve our health. We can stop eating the canned foods, you know, try to get more of the foods that we are, you know, even going raw foods. You know, we do, my wife runs a raw food program every so often there in Australia, 10 days just on raw foods. Absolutely a change of lifestyle for some people. And now, actually, most of our church there is going on juicing. Some of them are on 40 days of juicing by now. Just changing their lifestyle, just watching people have a whole new life experience there. And you know, with all of that, we're still missing something. Because there's a spiritual need that is necessary. There's something out there more than we are missing, because, you know, God is, with all of these things, God is trying to warn the world in order to save the world. It says in Revelation 7, 1-3, and after these things I saw 4 angels standing in the 4 corners of the earth, holding the 4 winds of the earth, that the wind should not blow on the earth, nor on the sea, nor on any tree. And I saw another angel ascending from the east, having the seal of the living God, and he cried with a loud voice to the 4 angels to whom it was given to hurt the earth and the sea, saying, hurt not the earth, neither the sea nor the trees, till we have sealed the servants of our God in their forehead. You know, I was actually in Nashville, Tennessee, holding a seminar when the World Trade Center was hit on September 11th, and 11th, 2001. And you know, the reports coming out of there, and people were so devastated. There was 2,000-something people died in the World Trade Center. And they're amazing how many people what great loss of life. But what most people do not realize is that that was minuscule compared to what it could have been. Do you realize that 50,000 people work in those buildings every day? Those 2 buildings? Actually, 50,000 actually work there. 100,000 people actually go through those 2 buildings every day, plus the 50,000 that work there. 100,000 visitors, that's 150,000 people. That means that if you take even a portion of that, a third of that, at any given time, that how many could have died? We're talking about between 50 and 100,000 people could have died, and only less than 3,000. Why? Because God is saying, hold on. Hold on, there's a work still to do. He wants to save the humanity. He wants to give us something to live beyond this world. So that even if after all these, I travel a lot, okay? So if all these pesticides, you know, you go inside the airplane and you know, smell the airplane, especially in Australia, they put this smell in it, this stuff there that you smell, and it's like it's going to kill you. Yeah, you go through all that stuff, and I'm going everywhere. I'm traveling, different time zones, different diet, different everything else, How are you going to survive? What happens when you do everything you possibly can to live, and then you still get sick? Which may happen. What then? So what? I die. So I die. Why? I'm not afraid to die. Why? Because there's another world coming. There's another place. And see, if we don't see something beyond this world, if we're looking at all of these health projects, we're trying to help people get their health back and everything else. We're working hard. My wife is working hard there at that clinic trying to get people's health back to where it should be. And what happens if somebody still gets sick and dies? Well, that's why we have to turn your attention to something else beside this world. There is another world out there. There's another place. The God who created this world says, I want to save you. And so he's holding back some of these things. Fukushima, you know how close that is to Tokyo? You know when that they were having those Geiger counters, whatever, to test radiation in Tokyo, and they were picking up radiation in Tokyo? Imagine if the wind had just turned maybe a different direction and that whole thing went to Tokyo. That would have been the end of the whole Tokyo. Why didn't it do that? Because there's a God in heaven saying, hold on. All right, you can do a little bit of damage, but right now, just hold on a bit. God is trying to wake us up. God is trying to prepare a people. This is why it says in Matthew 24:14, and this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations, and then shall the end come. God wants every one of us to have a chance to hear the gospel message and make a decision for ourselves. And then will the end of all these things come. And as we see more of these calamities happening, it says, Luke 21:28, and when these things begin to come to pass, then look up and lift up your heads, for your redemption draweth nigh. Yeah, there is something else beyond this. And I'm not afraid to say, we have health lectures a lot, and I'm not afraid to talk about the spiritual aspect of health, because to help you get your health back and then die afterwards, what's the good of it? What's the good of it? You work so hard to finally regain your health, get yourself back in position, and you die anyway. There was a lady that did a lot of work in the raw food industry, especially in wheatgrass juice and whatnot. Her name was Ann Wigmore. And she got her health back. I think she was from Hungary. She got her health back. She was teaching all these people how to get their health back and everything else. And they figured she's going to live till she was past 100. She died in her 90s. There was a fire in her house and she died in the fire. What's the good of all the healthy lifestyle? And you walk down the street and you get killed. In Sydney this year, they had 36 pedestrian deaths in Sydney just this year. 36 people died. I'll tell you something really heart-rending. I was going to our church for a missionary school class just a few months ago, and coming from my house, and suddenly there was this big traffic pileup. I left home earlier, so I still made it there on time, but to class on time. But there was such a big pileup, and I'm looking at this pileup. Man, what is going on? And as we drove past, there was a pickup truck sitting there on the side of the road, and you can see it had some wood there and everything else there. And the pickup is just sitting there, and then there was something, and I drove past, and there was a body in the middle of the road. Wow, what happened? So my wife listened to the news on her way to work, and she found out that, because I didn't see another car, I'm thinking, where's the other car? Who got hit? And there was no damage on the truck. So what happened? I did see a bumper somewhere, but that was about it. I didn't see where it belonged to. This guy was like 20, 21 years old. He was driving his truck to work. And he stopped the truck because he saw something on the back was not seated right. So he stopped to go fix it and tie it down. And as he went out there to go tie it down, a car came by and that's it, finished, died. Yeah, that's around us. We can live as healthy as we want, and we can be flicked out in a moment's notice like that. And with all of that, we got to look to another world. Imagine doing everything healthy, denying yourself everything, and then in the flick of a moment, you're gone because some accident happened. I'm sitting in the airplane sometimes. I've been in the airplane where you're sitting way up here, and all of a sudden it drops, 1,000 feet or something like that, just like that. And I've read about airplanes actually not stopping at the 1,000 feet, actually hitting under earth. There was one in New Orleans a few years ago that hit right down on the earth. Well, it can be out in the snuff of a moment. But I'm not worried. Why? Because there is another world. There is something else beyond this world that we are living in. But you know, this world will be destroyed. And notice Revelation 11:18. And the nations were angry, and thy wrath is come, and the time of the dead that they should be judged, and that thou shouldest give reward unto thy servants the prophets, and to the saints, and to them that fear thy name, small and great, and shouldest destroy them which what? Should we be concerned with everything around us? Should we be concerned with really protecting the environment, not just some tax to tax us to death, but actually to take... I have no problem being taxed to offset the carbon when they're actually going to go and do some research and to limit the pollution. Yeah, I'd love them to find a car that doesn't need petroleum fuels, fossil fuels. I'd love them to go and... Why don't they put all that money into that? And there in Australia, they just passed the carbon tax. And it's all, and they talked about how 100% of it's going back to offset the taxes for the poor people who can't afford the tax. I mean, it's not going out there to prevent carbon. I want something to really protect the earth, to actually go out here and actually protect the environment, to be able to develop some kind of a power, energy that I don't need to use fossil fuels. I would love something to really limit pollution. And of course, they've done a lot to limit pollution compared to the 1950s and 1960s. When I used to look at Los Angeles, it was so polluted back in those days. But those who destroy the earth are going to be destroyed by God because He created it. Is it possible for anyone to survive? Well, Matthew 24:13 says, but he that shall endure unto the end, the same shall be saved. Do you want to be able to endure through all of that? You know, there's a world going out here. There is a new heaven. Revelation 21:1 says, and I saw a new heaven and a new earth. For the first heaven and the first earth were passed away, and there was no more sea. There is another place coming. The question is, are we going to be there? And Micah 4:8 says, and thou, O tower of the flock, the stronghold of the daughter of Zion, unto thee shall it come, even the first dominion. The kingdom shall come to the daughter of Jerusalem. It says here the first dominion. Adam had the first dominion. It was taken away from him by sin, but it's going to be given back to us. Are we preparing for that new dominion? But you know, not everyone's going to be there. Psalm 37:11 says, but the meek shall inherit the earth, and shall delight themselves in the abundance of peace. Are we going to be there? Are we the meek that shall inherit the earth? You know, we're really concerned about our health, and I'm really concerned about people's health. I hate, like I said, I hate going to a hospital bed and watching someone die. I hate it. The worst thing I hate is sometimes you go to a hospital bed and they're dying because they're not drinking water. Simple. All I got to do is start drinking more water. They tell me, no, don't want water. Well, then what can you do? Sometimes I have my relatives. Here, just drink a little bit. Nope. Well, your heart bleeds for that. You can do nothing about it. But you can do something about it if you make a decision to improve your life here so that the days, I don't know how long we have left, because we could be snuffed out along the road like that man that I saw just along the road there. I can die any moment. But you know, until that time comes, I want to be able to enjoy it the most. Let me tell you one more thing before we close. When I was a teenager, I got serious on health. Okay. Now, I'm a third-generation vegetarian, so that's going beyond vegetarianism. You know, I basically took out certain things out of my diet, like, you know, milk and eggs. They kind of, I still use it occasionally, but I'm talking about, look, we used to eat it every day. All right, that was our staple diet, you know, typical East European diet. And even simple things as eating in between meals, I stopped eating in between meals, did all these type of things. And you know, my friends used to mock me and tell me, you know, in the end, everyone's going to die. So what's the good of it? What's the good of you doing all this stuff? And so what? And you know, when they were working, they worked just as I did. They could work just as much as I worked at that time. You know, went through our teen years, our 20s. Some of them would go partying and doing all this kind of crazy stuff. And they come and tell me, hey, how's your fanaticism still going on? You know, I'm still doing the same thing. I can still work like you do. You know, we hit our 30s and all of a sudden I watched them ground to a halt. Yeah, their life just ground to a halt. What? Yeah, for the first few years, yeah, it was the same. But we're looking at the long haul. I go to my 30s. I go to my 40s. They say, where are you getting your energy from? It's not just today, not just because of what I did yesterday. It's not some pill that you take. It's a change of lifestyle that you have. And yeah, so you keep going, and the longer you go and you look at these guys, you know what happened to you guys? It's what we did when we were teenagers. Do you want a better life? So in this world, we get a better life. But if this world is cut short for whatever reason, never know what it might be, there is another world. The question is, after all we learn about our health, are you preparing for another world? Amen.